All right. I'm here talking to Ed, who is a senior talent acquisition manager at Skyscanner. And Ed's got a really interesting background. We originally met a couple of months ago, kind of prepping for this virtual event that we were doing. And as he was talking, I was just like, wow, this guy has a lot of really interesting tidbits. And I'd love to share them with the readership of Select Software Reviews. And so, Ed, we're here to pick your brain a little bit, learn what you've kind of learned in the trenches. Thanks for being here. And do you mind just kind of kicking things off with a brief intro on what you've done and what you do currently?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Phil. Well, as you say, at the moment, I'm Senior Talent Acquisition Manager at Skyscanner. So I lead the engineering hiring specifically in that. So we have like 700 engineers and generally on a usual year hire about 200 engineers with our team. I've been at Skyscanner for 3 years and kind of fell into them through the back door. They were a client of mine before that, and for 12 years previously, I ran a small tech recruitment company in the UK, focusing on the bigger platform companies that are in London. So people like Sky and Betfair and ThoughtWorks were my clients, but Amazon became the biggest client that I worked with for 6 or 7 years, and really built the company around hunting out software engineers that would be successful at Amazon, and then basically providing those kind of profiles to our other clients who were all after the same type of thing. So we acted in a really niche way at relatively high volume for the type of person we were looking for. And Skyscanner were one of those clients, and when I exited, I agreed to join them for 10 weeks just to sort out one or two problems, and I'm still there over 3 years later, struggling to leave now because it's a cool place to work.
That's amazing. So you've seen the insides of lots of different companies as sort of an outside trusted partner, and now, of course, leading a team. 700 engineers is a lot. Hiring 200 engineers a year is no easy feat. I think a lot of people, either when they come into a new job or maybe they're doing some sort of like annual reviews, strategy planning, they're trying to understand their tech stacks. And I know that you've bought a lot of and used a lot of technologies. What advice would you give to somebody who maybe just started in a new TA or HR organization, or is just sort of looking at their tech stack? What advice would you have for them to think about their tech stack and how to analyze it?
Sure. So I think the important thing is always about where you're starting from. So understanding truly what the problem you're trying to solve is. And one of my peers at Skyscanner is an awesome TA ops person, which I know is like a growing role around the world now. And for me is so beneficial because with her, we go into so much detail around the genuine capacity that we have from each of our recruiters and each person that contributes to TA. And we can really understand, okay, next week we need to hire X amount of people in this domain. And from that data that we've collected and analyzed, that becomes much easier then to apply the right tool set to the problem, to understand how many people, how many candidates that you might be able to get into process from various sources, the tools that you're using to move those candidates forward. If you're going to, process 4 candidates a week versus 4,000 candidates a week, that's a completely different tool set you need to apply. And for me, the big thing that I see in TA is, people in my position, and I've certainly done this before, is you're under a lot of pressure. There's not enough candidates to go around, and the easy thing is to sometimes just throw money at the problem and to get another tool and pile another tool onto your recruiters to go and find candidates or process candidates or automate the process somehow. And actually, some of the most successful times that I've seen, either in my teams or friends around the industry, is when you actually get rid of a lot of that technology and a lot of those tools and optimize around a handful of technologies and a handful of platforms that you can really do well instead of doing lots in a really half-hearted way. And certainly something that we've done at Skyscanner, but I know a lot of other companies have found real benefit in actually reviewing, okay, we're getting some value out of this, but if we got rid of it, how much more value would we get out of the other things that we've got?
That's cool. And how do you understand whether or not you're getting the most value? How do you know where the waste is and what to focus on?
Really good question. I think that it will change slightly depending on the type of tool you're talking about and things. But if you look at the the sourcing platforms that are out there, things that help you access the candidates in the first place. And we work in the niche technology world. We're competing with the FAANG companies every day for software engineers. So it has to be about quality, and then you're starting to think about volume, and then you're starting to think about the experience that these candidates are having, coming through the tool itself. And we evaluate, my favorite thing that our ATS provides actually is a super quick snapshot of candidate quality by source, where it just displays really quickly, hey, this is a high volume source, but a low quality source for your candidates. And this one is producing 3 a week, but they're all really high quality. And then it's about understanding, okay, for the team that I have, for the recruiters that I've got doing this work every day, what is the best thing for them? Have they got the time to go through the high volume stuff to reach the gems that are out there? Or do we need to really bring down the amount of candidates we're dealing with? So when the few good candidates come through from a different source, we can really put the red glove experience on for those candidates and make sure they're really bought into our process. So we use data a lot to try and understand where candidates coming from, or the process that is being applied, and A/B testing different things constantly to see what differences that makes to individual candidate experiences, but also the recruiter experiences too.
Yeah. So if I'm reading you right, maybe you would look in your ATS and say, hey, we're getting, 2% of Indeed applicants are making it to a phone screen, and we're hiring almost none of them. However, the HireTool sourced people, or whatever your sourcing tool is, it's a 30% conversion rate. What if we got really good at HireTool and stopped spending all this time looking at Indeed resumes?
Exactly. So when I joined Skyscanner, actually, I think we had about 12 or 13 different routes to market, like job boards, marketplaces, spending a fortune on LinkedIn, and people were barely sending an email because they were so spread and dipping into all these different tools really lightly. We now have about 4 or 5 main sources to market. Hired is an example that we use a lot over here in London. I think it's pretty huge in the UK. It's just been merged with Vettery, of course, and we use that as a marketplace. HackerJob are a really good tool over in the UK. And what we did 3 years ago was we got rid of everything else that we were sourcing from and said, let's just be really good at LinkedIn Recruiter. It sounds really simple and basic and really first stage, but that was where the team was at a little bit, and we needed to say, before we move on from this, let's complete one game. Let's really make our recruiters feel like they understand that tool, how they can get the most out of that tool, and when they're putting their hands up and saying, I need something else, then it's about looking at what else something can offer us. We were dipping in sort of 10% of value on so many different things.
I think it sounds very simple when you say it out loud, but it's something that I'm very guilty of. I'm actually thinking for our own hiring right now. There's a source of hire that I haven't even had time to look at. I feel terrible. I feel so guilty about it, but it's a distraction from the 2 sources that are really, really good that I've just like gone really deep on. And we should just get rid of the other ones, right? Like, and that's sort of interesting when you think about the evolution of your tools. If top of funnel is a problem, it doesn't mean get an RPO or get, this and this necessarily. It could mean that, but in your case, it's sort of like a really interesting counterintuitive observation, which is like, get rid of, like, less is more, like the Marie Kondo, almost like Netflix, like throw out all the other stuff that's not adding value. If it doesn't give you joy, get rid of it, and then focus on the stuff that really gives you joy, which are these couple of sources of hire.
it coincided as well, that move, with changing our teams slightly and how we were set up internally to own positions. And particularly in the engineering side, what we did was we got one recruiter and we said, hey, this is your area, this is your space, you own it. So the experiences that candidates have in this space is completely your doing, and you can change that and improve it however you like, as long as it works with the Skyscanner bar and the Skyscanner way of interviewing and so on. But what it meant is that the different recruiters were going out and exploring the market and becoming experts in individual places and speaking to the candidates and saying, hey, how do you find a job? Where was the last time you got your successful offer from? And they were coming back and saying, I don't want to use that tool anymore. For my space, it's like maybe mobile engineers hired isn't the best. And we're suddenly realizing that they could do other things and look at other tools on a really specific nature. And I think that's where we really started maturing as a team, was when the individuals on the ground were able to dictate their own hiring strategy and the tool sets that they were using for their own little space.
You mentioned some of your key sources of hire. What are some of the other tools that are in your TA tech stack?
So we use ATS. We've got Greenhouse, which is, we've talked about that before, and is again, I mean, I think when people think about sourcing tools, they forget about their ATS and the fact that they have probably 80,000 candidates that have already shown an interest in their company previously. We use GoodTime as a scheduling tool. And we do a lot of work internally on things like Slack and stuff to generate interest from our engineers to support our TA function. And we've tried just about everything. You know, we've had amazing hiring. We've used GitHub, we've used Stack Overflow, and we've used all these different tools, but we try and keep it as slim as possible.
How do you, when you're looking at a new tool, let's say, you're like, hey, let's think about using Stack Overflow. How do you do it in a way that is lightweight? That's sort of like the lean startup sort of, let's test this, but maybe not fully commit, let's not fully commit budget, etc.
Yeah. The way we've done it before is we try and select like tool champions, I think is generally the way. So quite often these tools will come to the forefront from one of our recruiters, and they'll say, hey, look, I think this is a good idea. I think we should try it out. I've had a demo. I think it could work. And then we look at how to experiment with that. So we make sure we go into it as a full project. So we'll get 1 to 3 recruiters that really go out and commit to using it in the way that the product team suggests and advise. And we try and go all in on that, because that's the way that, if you're going to use it long term, you've got to make sure the data you get in that initial term really reflects it. And they will go in with a project, and we will have an understanding of what data we're looking at. So that's around like the time that it takes for the recruiters to use. So we measure that pretty closely. We look at the response rates. We look at how our brand's coming across and try and evaluate that. And we look at the success, obviously, of candidates in that time frame, and try and set fairly consistent parameters for each trial that we do.
I love it. So I love the idea of a tool champion. So somebody owns this thing, and they probably have raised their hand. Maybe they're even the person that brought you the idea in the first place. There are clear benchmarks that you're getting from other sources of hire, and you're saying, hey, here's the time frame. Here's what this needs to hit. Here's the budget. And what is it, like a 3 or 6 month kind of trial period?
Often, especially if you're getting a free trial, you can do that within a month, and you have really clear data. But yeah, usually otherwise, if you're going to sign up to it and try a full cycle out, it's usually like a 6-month cycle you can generally agree to. And we'll have those people lead out, and they'll go and work really closely with the product company, and they'll bring those learnings back and hopefully spread them around the rest of the team and get other people engaged in how they work. We did this. This is something I did when I joined, and we weren't using LinkedIn, which was just, to me, coming from an agency. I was like, hey, I've been supplying you people. You've been paying me thousands of pounds for this, and all I've been doing is sitting on emails and talking about your company. And so we really try to create much more of a proactive sourcing culture within Skyscanner from the recruiters. but we ended up pushing it so far that we were super lucky that our CEO got on board with this and loved the way that we were approaching our, Skyscanner is such a customer first, a traveler first company, which is why I liked them. And all I did was convert the word candidate into traveler. And as soon as I did that, the whole exec team were like, oh my God, we've got 100,000 travelers going through our recruitment process and getting annoyed. And so it was a really good basis to change the way recruitment was looked at in Skyscanner. And a big thing of mine is for a TA team to be an enablement team to allow a company to recruit better, rather than a bottleneck where they take on all TA responsibility themselves. And so we got it to the point where we had enough data to prove that LinkedIn was great value if everybody applied themselves in the right way to it. That they gave us enough money to go and get an enterprise account, and then that means we can now have 300 recruiter licenses spread across engineers and hiring managers and tribe leads and directors who are all out there doing different levels of commitment to how they support TA. So that's, going in and helping us compile searches of candidates, or some of them help us screen, or some of them help us engage and send emails themselves. And if you can push a tool, I think, to that level of engagement, you can suddenly, the next tool you go to the business with and say, hey, I want to invest 60 grand, 100 grand in this, and this is how we're going to use it as a business, it becomes much easier.
I think that covers like 9 blog posts that we've written in the last couple of years around, evangelizing what you're doing internally from a TA perspective, the importance of candidate experience. I think Virgin's the company that's famous for doing that whole employer branding case study and how much they were losing as a revenue. That's amazing. Yeah. This is a broad question, but I'm curious, Amazon is a company everybody looks up to. What's like the 1 or 2 things that you learned from working with Amazon that you still use today?
When it took me, the Amazon thing is quite interesting, because when they hit London, they pulled me in, and they pulled, probably 15 different recruitment companies in, and we all sat in a room together and looked at each other as these sort of recruiters do, and thought, oh my God, do I really want to be bothered to work this? And I think after a few months, myself and my business partner were the only ones out of that original group still turning up, and we were so determined to work out how to nail this role. And I think in London we were a little bit behind a lot of the West Coast stuff in terms of how they hired and competency-based interviewing and these things. Once the penny dropped for us as a small business, it became so easy. It was just this cycle that we went on. And as I got more into Amazon and read books about them and spoke to some of their leadership over here in London, I realized that I was sort of slowly building my little business around a lot of their models. So that flywheel effect and the customer obsession thing that they have is something that I always thought should be in recruitment more. Like, I couldn't believe that people didn't look after their candidates more. And it's what I kind of had this little business that was about. It was very nice. It was quite fluffy. But actually what Amazon showed me was almost a mechanism to turn that into a proper structure and a proper business plan. And so what we did from our point of view was take the Amazon business model and apply it to how we recruited for them almost. So we created this candidate obsession life cycle. So we broke our business apart and visually pulled it into, probably about 200 components. And it came down to things like how we answer the phone and the language we use, and the way that we display job specs and things completely changed to the point where we no longer sent job specs. We had a platform built just for us to display like the brand of our clients and things like this. And that flywheel effect, every element of our recruitment process that we set up for our clients was something that should be selling their brand and should be allowing the candidate to access information and get buy-in from that. And so that was quite an interesting thing, that from a tooling perspective, actually we lost more tools in that process. So we got rid of more than we took on, and the tools that we needed the most, actually often we built ourselves. And applied a sort of slightly different thought process to it.
Mm. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned you guys use Good Time for scheduling, which is this like super powered scheduling. Like it's amazing. It's like this like I think Silicon Valley based company that just like went super deep on this one problem. Why
Yeah.
did you decide to add and keep that to your tech stack?
So we've got Skyscanner, the way, Skyscanner interview actually in a similar way to Amazon and a lot of the big tech companies. And, to give you an example, for an engineer coming to their first interview, they will do 2 interviews and they all do the same 2 interviews. And one of them is a culture interview, and we have tens and tens of interviewers signed off capable of doing that interview. And the other interview they'll do on that session, and it's a 2-hour session, back to back 1 hours. The technical one, a certain group, a certain cohort will be signed off for that. And we had pre-COVID, we had a team, probably it got to like 6 or 7 coordinators who were just spending their life finding the right slots, trying to order it so that one interviewer wasn't doing 6 in a week and another was doing 0. And Good Time really helped modernize that. I mean, it took these people out of Outlook, where they were spending 8 hours a day, and gave them an opportunity to put much more order and structure into it. And I think it went from something like 63 clicks to set up an interview to as little as 9. And that's really helped. And getting interviews set up was a real effort for us. So the average time to set up a final stage interview in engineering for us a few years ago was like 6.3 days. It was crazy. It's now hours that we can do that. And part of that is Good Time. Part of it is our awesome talent ops team that have really revolutionized their work, but they've done it through good tooling too.
That's cool. And the ROI is decreased spend on humans doing work humans don't want to do, as well as decreased time to fill. And I would imagine better candidate experience leads to a higher close rate at the end of the day.
That's the key one for me in my position is we actually get the candidates through to the end, and we're not sort of, Facebook at one time were beating us in our recruitment process, and we knew if their time to hire was quicker than ours, it was bad news. So we've completely revolutionized that. And actually just this year, I think we're down to, in some areas, 28-day turnarounds, 35-day turnarounds from start to finish. And that includes, coding challenges and offers and things like that. So yeah, it's a big difference.
That's insane for technical hiring, competing against FANG, the sort of top engineering talent. That's crazy. You guys were in a unique position at the beginning of the pandemic where you're in travel, and unfortunately people stopped traveling, right? And so you went through this sort of period of contraction. What was your biggest learning from that stretch?
It was bad timing in the sense that we'd spent 18 months or so building such a phenomenal TA team individually, but also in terms of the philosophy that we had around recruiting, and our engagement from the business was awesome. It was, being in travel, it wasn't an easy time, and we're still coming out of it in many ways, but we're a very different kind of busy right now, which is great to be expanding again. The main learns from a TA point of view was that we actually had like 8 months of no hiring, which was awesome in a way. Like, I would rather not have had it, but it gave us a chance to step back and understand, okay, how do we, when we come back out of this, which we knew we would, how do we come back out of it with that quality point of view really front and center? So we'd been under the cosh before COVID in terms of like the speed and the volume that we had to hire at, and the ambitions of the company were huge. And we were never quite able to nail the plans that we had about how we're going to make this TA function operate as well as we thought it could. So it gave us a chance to sit back and say, okay, let's start breaking it down like I had done with the recruitment agency previously. What are we doing in terms of the way we use our individual tools? If we're not going to be able to renew, Hire and HackerJob and these other sourcing routes. You know, what are we doing with LinkedIn while we're quiet to make sure that when we come out the other side, from a knowledge bank perspective, the TA team are ready to go. So we spent a lot of time just understanding how to take ourselves from, you know, 3 out of 5 at doing X to a 5 out of 5, and what that should look like, and how to get there. It's a lot of learning time.
It's sort of interesting. Do you think that perhaps it makes sense to, in the craziness of recruiting and this treadmill that you're always under and the pressure you're always under, to try to carve out similar headspace for longer term thinking? Like, have you guys tried to do that as you start to grow again, or it's just like, that was awesome that we had that time, but it's never going to happen again, and we're just back on the treadmill?
Yeah. Well, hopefully not, but you know, equally you kind of want it. And I think, yeah, we came into this year thinking hiring would be like an incremental gain, and you know, we'll have a few roles this month, a few more next month, and within 2 weeks of January, we were like, okay, let's get back to it. We need to build up our engineering org. We need to build these products, get ready for the return to travel. And it was almost suddenly, having gone, where's travel at? We were saying, you know, are we going to be ready for it? So it's just been a super exciting year and a super exhausting one, because we had to rebuild the TA team a little bit as well. I think a few years ago, when I was running the company, I was really lucky. I got to go on this course, which is in the States and it's in the UK. It's called 10KSB. It's a Goldman Sachs sponsored. It's like a mini MBA for startup founders and stuff. I would highly recommend it. And over here in the UK, it's done by the Saïd Business School in Oxford University and Leeds University as well. And I spent 4 months with like a cohort of 50 company owners, and the main message every day was take time out. Like, do not be in your business all the time. Do not be thinking about the operations or the sales or the tax or like, you know, HR issues with your teams. Just go and spend some time out, go and sit on a mountain and look at the stars and think about how you can take it to the next step, or are you going in the right direction? And I think even now, when I'm in the weeds a little bit, and this year I've been really hands-on until a couple of months ago, and had to go right back into doing placements and talking to candidates every day. I've had to think to myself, where are we going as a team? Are we doing the right things as an organization? Is our data in the right place? And so usually I can manage to do that, but it's so good when you get an opportunity to just go, okay, you know, I'm a very visual person. One of my biggest tools that I use for me is Miro. Like, I just map out stuff all the time. I put the process in boxes and arrows, and I break down all the little things on post-it notes that I think can be done, and talk about emotions on those maps as well. And then you can really just take one piece of that and push it to the side and say, how good is that tiny element of our process map at the moment? And it's either really great or it's really bad. And how do you push it to the next level? And then once you've worked that out and done that, you can just slot it back in a slightly different form, and then move around the map and take something else out. And it's quite easy once you've got that visual, I find, to like get the low-hanging fruit and do the really easy stuff and make little changes, and slowly you start seeing that incremental improvement come through.
It's amazing advice, and it's always interesting to me to hear what is like sort of the core message of one of these programs that is affiliated, you know, with Goldman, with Oxford. Like, it's obviously a very high quality program, and they're telling you one thing over and over and over again. That's a really good piece of advice. And you can look at, I think Bill Gates is famous for like taking several weeks a year and going to a cabin in the woods and reading books. And all these amazing business leaders do this sort of stuff. So I think that's an amazing piece of advice and an amazing place to end our conversation, because I know that it's August and you haven't taken a day off this year.
Next week is my time to reflect. Yeah,
Um,
that's
but
cool.
Ed, this has been such an awesome conversation. It's hard for me to overstate how much I appreciated all the insights. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned with myself and our audience.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.